Author of Real Food Fermentation, Revised and Expanded, and co-author of Kombucha, Kefir, and Beyond. And he's a chef instructor at the Kefir School of Culinary Arts, where he teaches fermentation. His interests include food, health and wellness, fitness, computers, music, and two-wheel vehicles. And while some people struggle with microbes, Alex embraces them. He firmly believes that fermenting is a step on our path to reclaiming our own food destiny. After the talk, Alex will be signing copies of his books, Real Food Fermentation, Revised and Expanded, as well as Kombucha, Kefir, and Beyond in the vendor hall. So you can go check that out. And copies of his books are available for purchase at the welcome table. I'll also mention that the festival is supported by donations, so if you feel so inclined while you're walking around, there's a few Venmo QR codes out and about. But thanks for being here, thanks for your support, and let's welcome Alex.
Is it okay if I take this out?
Yeah.
Test. Everyone hear me? Maybe I shouldn't tape it out of the folder.
No, it's okay. I just turned it.
Okay. If anyone at any point can't hear me, just like wave your arms wildly, and I'll probably notice. I have some QR codes on here if you want to look at my blog or at my Instagram, or I can tell you afterwards at the table. I'll give you a minute if you want to do that. So the Instagram is the top one, blog's the bottom one. I hope they work for you at whatever distance you're at. Okay, I shall proceed. So first I will acknowledge Sandra Katz, who is the person who inspired me to get here. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to move this chair over here and put my laptop on it, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to look at you. So give me 1 second. I think this will be much better. Except now I'm blocking the screen. That's okay. You can listen to me talk. The screen is optional. It's just what I'm saying. First, I'll show you what I brought. I brought a few props. Nothing crazy. Does anyone know what this is? Yes, it's a lactic acid producing bacterium. They've been rebranded. They keep renaming them anyway. So. You can be generic and just call it lactic acid producing bacterium. It says acidophilus on here. I don't know. So this is what they look like, but they're a little smaller. I also saw in there there were pickles, and they look a lot like lactobacillus. I'd never made that connection before, but they're terribly cute. And they're up in the balcony. They're selling them. They have some with catnip too. I brought some blue tape because this is an important part of the toolkit for fermenting, so that you can write what you fermented, so that, especially if you live with other humans, because otherwise they'll be looking at these jars and they won't know what they are and they'll throw them away. Also, you can write the date on them, because sometimes that's important too. I brought my favorite airlock, which is a piece of silicone. It's wide mouth size. It has a tiny little hole that, with just little pressure, the hole opens, but otherwise it's closed. Anyway, this is for most fermenting projects. This is like all you need, and it will prevent, prevent things from exploding on the one hand, prevent weird yeast from growing in your lacto ferments. Anyway, I love these, and they're cheap, and they're machine washable. I'm not selling them. You have to find them yourself. I brought my Ferment Oaxaca hat from the Oaxaca Fermentation Festival. I'm wearing a random kombucha and chill t-shirt. I was going to wear one from the Ashland, Oregon Fermentation Festival, but I couldn't find it, so I wore this one instead. But I'm not sure if, like, you're at a fermentation festival, it's better to wear the t-shirt from the fermentation festival you're at, or from another one. I don't know if it's like when you go see a band, it's like, I don't know if it's cooler to wear like some other band's t-shirt, but anyway, this is what I wore. So here's my background. I took AP Chemistry in high school and I liked it. I took some biology and I didn't like it as much, and I wish I had now because it's relevant. I took History of Science and I loved it. I got interested in health, I got interested in food, I got interested in sustainability and the environment, and those were still three separate things for me somehow. Then I got interested in like the origin of humans and ethnobotany and consciousness. And then went to cooking school in Cambridge at the Cambridge School of Culinary Arts, which is about a mile from here as the crow flies. And if you want to take one cooking class, I would recommend a knife skills class, because that will make everything better. If you cut things uniformly, they will ferment uniformly or cook uniformly or whatever. And if you take a knife skills class, also you won't cut your fingers off. And also you can cut things faster. And also you can impress your friends because you do. And you can, it'll help you if you wind up in like a strange kitchen with some knife you've never seen before. You'll be able to use it better. I took classes at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition in New York, and that helped me. The biggest thing that did was help me understand that different people need different things, food and health and nutrition-wise, bio-individuality. Because at various moments I've been pretty dogmatic about like what's good to eat and what's not. Orthorexia, and not just for myself. I've like tried to put it on other people, and that's I tried to get my mom to buy like organic chickens, and I think I went about it the wrong way, and so it took years for me to convince her that for her that anyway. Let's see, and then I was in a book club called the Sustainable Food Book Club, and we read books about food sustainability. So I put two of those things together. And I was in a bookstore with my friend Deborah, and we were looking at some books, and there was a book called The Revolution Will Not Be Microwaved. And I said, well, I don't care what it's about, it's the best title ever. I'm gonna buy it. And so I bought it and I read it, and it was by this Sandor Katz, who I mentioned, and it was about underground food movements and radical food politics. And I said, what's that? Like, I've never heard those words combined in that order. And so I read it and it blew my mind. And I said, okay, what else has this Sandor Alex Katz written? And he'd written a book called Wild Fermentation. And it was a book that maybe it's the book that started, or certainly escalated the fermentation revival that we're part of. So that was what started for me with fermenting. So then I started fermenting, and then I started doing demos and classes on fermenting, and I wound up writing 2 books about fermenting, which I will show you. There's one called Real Food Fermentation. It's been in a couple of printings. This is the most recent one that's available. And then with my friend Raquel in Mexico, who organizes the Oaxaca Fermentation Festival, Kombucha, Kefir, and Beyond, which is focused just on drinks. And obviously I recommend them both. I'll be signing them direct after this talk at the book table, which is, you go in the door and it's on your right. And so what I want to say about fermenting, about all this, is connecting the dots. I think, you may think that you're interested in like 5 different things that have nothing to do with each other, but they might have something to do with each other. And if you can figure out what, then you may, and maybe a lot of you have already done this, maybe it was just my density that it takes so long for me, but if you can figure out what the connection is, that may be telling you like what your special sauce is, or like what, not everyone here is going to write a book about fermentation. I mean, frankly, it's too late. There's like too many books about fermentation already. But there may be, whatever the next thing is, you may be drawn to it for reasons that I cannot foresee right now. So I guess just pay attention to what the universe puts in front of you, and forgive me if it sounds like I'm giving unsolicited advice, but you did come to my talk, so I feel like I have some license to make suggestions. And so about the talk, it's going to be a while before I start talking about fermentation. I'm going to talk about a lot of other stuff, because by the time we get to fermentation, it'll be completely obvious to you how it works because of all the context that I'm going to bring. And I'm all about context, so I hope you like context. Anyway, so food preserving in general. Has anyone here taken the Serve Safe class? Okay, there's 1, 2, 3, yeah, 4, 5. Serve Safe is a class that one takes if one is doing food service, like if you're serving people food, and it tells you about, on the simplest level, it's like how long you can leave perishable foods out, right? And you need to know that if you're working somewhere where you're serving people food. There's more to it though, and I think it's a great starting point for understanding food preserving. And so food preserving in general, okay, as a home cook or a food professional, what is important to know about food preserving and preserved food? But first, what even is food preserving? Does anyone want to take a crack at it, or shall I just do my version?
Do your version.
My version, okay. So Sandra says, expanding the window of edibility for a food, and that's true, that's part of it. Another way of looking at it, food preserving is the opposite of food spoilage. I came up with that, and that seems, it's stating the absolute obvious, but that seems like what it is. So if we know the conditions that lead to spoilage, then that tells us something about how to avoid spoilage. And the next question, should I preserve food myself? Should I buy food that's already preserved? Do I even care about preserved foods? This is a bit of a devil's advocate. And so reasons to preserve. When you make your own food from scratch, you know exactly what's going into it. You make it exactly the way you want, taste-wise, nutrition-wise. It's like on the old Burger King commercials, have it your way. Anyone remember those? Yeah, okay. But for real, right? And there's an energy crisis. We may need to use less energy-intensive ways of preserving food, and fermentation is extremely non-energy intensive. In general, you don't need fuel or a whole lot. Sometimes you don't even need water. You need, salt, but sometimes it takes energy to get salt. So, if there's a political or economic crisis, we may need to rely on our local economy more. And even if there isn't, it's good to rely on the local economy, build community. There's a health crisis, who knows what happens to our supply chain. If there's a zombie apocalypse, your guess is as good as mine. I think the zombie apocalypse that people are fascinated with, based on what people watch on TV and all that, is an archetype of infrastructure collapse. I think this is when all our assumptions go out the window. And so I think the reason people are fascinated by it is because they're anxious that, like everything, our built, environment is all going to crumble. And I hope it doesn't. But I do have a machete at my house. The zombies come. It's good for gardening too. And then food preserving is fun, good potential community, family activity. Food brings people together. It's an activity all of them to share. And much or most of the food we eat today is preserved one way or another, whether you consciously acknowledge it or not, unless it was freshly harvested or killed or whatever. And what are some of the most common food preserving techniques? And some of them we may not even think of as preserving, but really they are. And the number one is refrigeration, which is very much a food preserving technique. It's very easy. Some things will last a few days, some things will last a week, some things will last months or years, depending on various factors, including how much you get grossed out by things that are years old in your fridge. Freezing is another good one. Canning, things can last a very long time. There's some person on YouTube who found some canned food from the Civil War, some meat, and he opened it and ate it, and he said it wasn't very good. But canning is very good. When it's good, it's very, very good. And then when anything goes wrong, it's a problem. And so pasteurization is sort of like canning. Like the milk you get in a box, the UHT milk, is more or less canned, right? Shelf stable, it's heated, no microbes in it. Ultra pasteurized milk is kind of the same as UHT, except that Americans don't like food, like milk in a box on a shelf. So they took that same milk and put it in a milk carton and put it in the refrigerator section so that Americans would buy it. I'm not saying whether it's good or bad, it's canned, give or take. Standard pasteurization is like partial canning, and the deal with canning is you kill microbes, you deactivate enzymes, and then you seal it up to some extent. Drying is a preserving technique. It's another fairly low energy one. Can be pickling with acid or base. Does anyone know what some of the basic or alkaline ferments are? There's like a
Lutefisk.
lutefisk, yeah. There's some weird fish. Well, I don't want to say weird. There are some slightly unusual around here. Well, I don't even want to say that. There's some fish ferments that are alkaline. Lutefisk. There's a Swedish one called surströmming, which I'm sure I'm pronouncing wrong. There's a shark in Iceland called hakarl. The 1,000-year egg is an alkaline pickle. Anyway, but most pickles are acidic, the ones we know with vinegar. And then there's fermentation. And fermentation, some fermented things wouldn't last very long at room temp. And then some of them last as long as you care to keep them around. Like sauerkraut's pretty durable. Like whole head cabbage sauerkraut is very durable. If you're on a sailing ship, make some whole head cabbage sauerkraut and it'll last you for longer than you want to be at sea, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so maybe most of our favorite foods are preserved, including many things we don't think of as preserved, like bread. Bread is preserved grain. Grain, starchy root vegetables, bread, beer, and everything in between. And I say everything in between bread and beer because there are some things. There's something called kvass in Russia, which is like a lightweight beer made out of old bread. There's something called øllebrød. I'm probably not pronouncing that right either, in Denmark, which is porridge that's allowed to ferment. So it's somewhere between porridge and beer, and then you eat that for breakfast. There's a similar thing in parts of China where they take the old rice and they put a yeast starter in the rice and they let it sit and it turns into sort of alcoholic rice. And they eat that for breakfast. And I'll talk about this. There's a time before we had cars when if people were a little tipsy, it really didn't matter. And anyway, I'll come back to that also. Dairy ferments and preserves cheese, sour cream, and friends, yogurt, kefir, and other sour curdled milk variants. Vinegars, vinaigre in French, vinagre in Spanish, sour wine. It's wine that's been fermented again with bacteria turned to sour. Canned fish is certainly preserved, canned seafood and meats. Canned veg and fruit and dairy, kombucha, which is preserved sweet tea. It's more for the health benefits than because you're worried you're not going to have sweet tea again, or that your sweet tea is seasonal, that you only get it in October or something. There are other vegetable fruit ferments and or pickles like kimchi, sauerkraut, etc., capers, olives, prepared horseradish. Ulabashi are these very sour plums, chutneys. All these are, fruit ferments and or pickles. Other preserved fruits, like jams and things, like sugar, it turns out, is a way to preserve things. We'll see why. Then there's a whole family of koji mold ferments, and they are playing a big role at this fermentation festival. The panel at the end is going to be about protein ferments, and the short version of the story is you break protein down into its constituent amino acids, and then you have something that's flavorful. This amino-free glutamic acid in particular gives you the umami flavor that, soy sauce, mushrooms, miso. So soy sauce and miso are made with this koji mold. You can apply koji mold to pretty much anything that has a little protein in it. That's become popular to do these days. And then you can also make amino sauces and pastes other ways, like they use hydrochloric acid or other chemical processes to break up proteins, like Bragg liquid aminos and Marmite. Bragg liquid aminos are sort of like soy sauce, except they don't have any soy in them, and they aren't made with koji. But they for people who are very sensitive to certain kinds of microbes, it can be useful. Garum, aka fish sauce, Maine Garum Company is here. Fish sauce you make by breaking down fish using the fish's own digestive enzymes from its digestive tract. And so you just throw fish in a barrel, literally with 10% salt, and the fish digest themselves. I don't know, maybe you chop them up, I'm not sure. But you can ask. You must, right? But they're little fish. And interestingly, honey is naturally shelf stable, so you don't have to preserve it. When you add water to it, it will ferment. We will understand why also shortly when we talk about, back to the serve safe thing. Fermented sugary things, starchy things, we get alcoholic ferments, wine, beer, cider, mead, etc. Distilled spirits, so the distilled spirits like vodka, whiskey, etc., all of them start as fermented, as like wine, beer, cider, mead family things, which are then the stuff that the alcohol is separated out. As far as I know, there's no commercially viable way of making alcohol besides fermenting things. I'm sure there's some way to do it in a lab at a very, with difficulty, but it's not used. If there is, they don't use it commercially. So everything starts as some kind of fermented feedstock before it's turned into distilled spirit. And you can use alcohol as a solvent or a carrier for medicinal herbs. Like vermouth is wine with alcohol and some herbs in it. Vermouth means wormwood, originally used to purge you of parasites. May or may not have worked. Also has some psychoactive effects. And then cannabis, there's a cannabis tincture in alcohol. It's called Green Dragon, and apparently that's a good carrier for the cannabis and its effects, etc. There's a lot of etc. Okay, so I'll take one or two questions if there are any. Otherwise, I'll forge ahead. Is the pace good? Should I go faster, slower? It's good. Okay. Everyone hear me? Okay, good.
Good pace.
Okay. How do we preserve food? Preserving food is simply ensuring that food won't spoil and that people will not be sickened. Okay, so here's this is important, Fat Tom. And so this is what we learn in Serve Safe. These are the 6, everything like this is an oversimplification, but these are the 6 things that affect food spoiling or not. So food, what kind of food is it? Proteins are more attractive to microorganisms than other macronutrients. Acidity, there's a certain range of acidity in which things are vulnerable, and if you go off either end, either acidic or alkaline, they're less vulnerable. Time, like anything can sit on the counter for 5 minutes. Almost anything. But like once you get past 4 hours, then if something's susceptible to spoilage, then 4 hours is like the unofficial boundary. Temperature, we know if things are in the fridge, they're preserved for a while. If things are hot enough, then they're preserved for a while. because the microbes can't survive above a certain temperature. Although there are some that will survive at very high temperatures, but the ones that really, really hurt you and are, well, more oxygen. Most pathogens need oxygen, but some important ones, like the one that leads to botulism, don't need oxygen. And because they don't need oxygen, all the other ones do. If there's no oxygen, they'll tend to take over, and that's not what we want. And then moisture. This one's a little complicated. So, moisture seems straightforward, but it's not actually like how much water is in something, it's how available that water is to the microbes. So there's some water activity. It's expressed as a ratio of the water, the vapor pressure of the water in a food to the vapor pressure of pure water. So if the food has like X amount of water in it, like how much water vapor is coming off of it at room temperature, say, versus how much water vapor is coming off of that same amount of water without the food. And it predicts how likely water is to move from the food product into the cells of microorganisms that may be present. That's according to Wikipedia. And so, intuitively it makes sense. Like if something's dry, it's not going to spoil, and a glass of water isn't going to spoil either because there's too much water in it. But there's a range, and most foods that spoil are in that range of things that might spoil. So, anyway, so we have like these variables, and like if you think about it as a graph, like we've described like some kind of box in n-dimensional space of the danger zone, right? And that's not really how it works, because if something's 134 degrees, it's a lot safer than something that's like 80 degrees, right? So it's not really going to be, the graph isn't really going to be a box, but it would be too difficult if we really tried to parameterize it as an n-dimensional, n-1 dimensional surface, whatever. So instead we draw this big box and say, this is what, it's safe outside of this box and it's dangerous inside the box. And hopefully we do it conservatively. So what happens when we go into the danger zone, which is the box? Everyone with me on this box? Yeah, okay. So microbes. So microbes grow and they generate enzymes that break down the foods, some of them in ways that we want, and then some of them in ways that we don't want. And then some of the microbes are harmful just if we eat those microbes. And then some of the microbes generate toxins as byproducts of their metabolism. And then you can kill the microbe, but the byproducts are still there, and then you get sick from that. And then what are enzymes? So anyway, there's a fair amount to know about that. So if we are going into the danger zone, we should know what we're doing, and that's what fermenting is. So we'll get to that. So what are enzymes? Enzymes catalyze biochemical reactions. That means they make them happen at a higher rate. And some enzymes are endogenous, so we have some enzymes inside of us, and then some of them are created by microbes. And in fact, some of the ones that are inside of us are created by microbes, so it's not like really great dichotomy. But anyway, most food preserving involves staying within the boundaries of fat tom. And so here's some, canning, fermenting, vinegar pickling, lye pickling, preserving underlayer fat, drying, salting. A lot of them involve removing moisture, some of them involve removing oxygen, some of them involve acidity. Acidity is an obvious one. And so drying is decreasing water activity, and drying and using salt and sugar and alcohol are all ways of reducing water activity. Putting something under alcohol is in some ways drying it. Like alcohol seems wet, but it's not, because it'll pull water out of things and prevent water from reaching microbes. Okay, so canning kills all the microbes, deactivates all the enzymes, and then seals things. And it's a newish technology. We think of it as being old-timey, but Napoleonic era, so early 1800s. And it was invented, Napoleon put out a request for proposals for how he could feed his army, and somebody came up with canning, and you can carry canned foods around with you. So it's not low tech. Like if you do it wrong, It requires like a good seal, which you can't really do with like clay, right? And if you do it wrong, you can have the wrong microbes. And UHT for milk, let's see, I talked about that. Pasteurization. Okay, I haven't said what fermentation is exactly yet, have I? Okay, so here we are. As promised, it's half an hour into the talk. I'm going to start talking about fermentation. Okay, so fermenting is transforming and often preserving food by the action of microbes and enzymes. Microbes are microscopic life forms, and they include bacteria, yeasts, and molds. And the term fermentation has another meaning in biochemistry. We're going to ignore some cellular metabolism, blah, blah. Not relevant to the culinary. It's different, a little confusing. Fermentation can include transformation via enzymes. Enzymes are molecules, generally proteins, not always, that catalyze, increase the rate of chemical reactions. And in a few cases, we use the word fermentation to describe enzymatic transformations that don't have to do with microbes, like curing black tea, we'll call fermenting. Fish sauce, here we are in the fermentation vessel. There are no microbes involved with fish sauce, as far as I know, but there are enzymes in from the fish guts. And then the Greenland shark, I don't think it's big. I don't think there's a lot of microbes going on. Kiviak is from Greenland, and shall I describe how you make it? Okay, you get 100 little birds, and you stuff them into a dead seal, and then you close it up and bury it for 3 months, and then you come back and then you eat the little birds. But if you do it wrong, you can get sick. And I have a friend who eats a lot of it, and he says that after he got used to it, he never felt better in his life. And very digestible because it's already digested. It's like fish sauce, but for birds. And then, so there are some teas that that actually do involve microbes in their fermentation, like pu'er tea. Okay, now viruses. Until recently, I said, viruses don't have anything to do with fermentation. I just started, looking on the internet, and so people are now only somewhat recently starting to look at the role of viruses in fermentation. Now, are viruses microbes? People disagree about whether viruses are alive or not, so are they a life form? Player's choice. But they can play an indirect role in fermentation by affecting the bacterial and fungal communities in various ways, including doing things like facilitating horizontal gene transfer. So they accelerate the adaptation of microbes to a particular environment. It's fascinating. I don't know, I think it's fascinating. Anyway, you can Google that, and I don't know a whole lot more about it, but it seems fascinating. Okay, so fermentation, as I said, may involve a controlled journey into the time temperature danger zone. I have a link to the Kenny Loggins song, Danger Zone. Should I play it? Show of hands. Okay, no, I don't need to play it. You know the song. Okay, so in order to enlist microbes in our food processing, we must create the conditions for them to live and multiply. So what does fermentation do to, so it's an important one. Like we study the time temperature danger zone so that we can enter it, not so that we can avoid it for fermenting. Because we want the microbes. That's the thing that makes fermenting different from pretty much everything else. That was the punchline. The rest is all from here on down. It's just details, right? Okay, so what does fermentation do to food macronutrients? The traditional macronutrients are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. But then alcohol is really a macronutrient also, and is involved in fermentation. And then ketones also. But the most important are the first three, like I said. Carbohydrates can be sugar, simple sugars, double sugars, like table sugar, starches, and so on. And to oversimplify greatly, again, this is another very important list of bullet points. Here it is. This is it right here. Yeasts turn carbs into carbon dioxide and alcohol, and not much more. Sometimes we want the carbon dioxide to get bubbles in our bread for making bread. The alcohol cooks off when you bake your bread. Sometimes we want the alcohol. We're making wine. Sometimes we want both. We're making sparkling wine or kombucha. And kombucha, in the process of kombucha fermenting, there's all this alcohol being made all the time. But because kombucha also contains bacteria, all that alcohol is being turned into acid almost as fast as it shows up. So, which is the next bullet point. Bacteria transform carbs into lactic acid, and they also transform alcohol and oxygen into acetic acid, which is vinegar. So kombucha is sort of a continual formation of alcohol and transformation of the alcohol into acid. And sometimes there's more or less alcohol left over in the kombucha, but it's like tickling the regulatory definition of no alcohol or alcohol, which is why there was like Kombucha Gate in 2010, and they pulled all the kombucha off the shelves, and some celebrity claimed they got drunk off of kombucha when they were pulled over and given a DUI. Lindsay Lohan. It's not clear whether that story is actually true or not. I don't want to harsh on Lindsay Lohan, but yes, it was Lindsay Lohan. Anyway, so bacteria make things sour. Yeast make alcohol and bubbles. Bacteria make things sour. They do other things too. And then molds do a whole lot. Molds are much more complicated life forms, and they can break down carbs. I mean, everyone can apparently, but they can also break down proteins into amino acids, like when we're talking about koji mold making soy sauce and miso, which is broken down soy. And they can also break down fats into fatty acids and ketones. And then they can do other things. And molds are, I think, yeast and bacteria, like in the fermenting community, there are a lot of books about that, but molds are a lot more, there's still a lot more to go, and it's very hard as a non-professional to understand everything that molds can do, or as a professional. So that's the next frontier, and that's sort of what's happening in the fermentation world right now. And again, the panel at the end will be talking about that kind of ferment. Okay, so a very brief history and more motivation for fermenting. Where am I? I have 10 minutes, okay. All right, I'll talk fast. Probably some fruit or juice became overripe and turned into wine. I've heard about monkeys going on drunken killing sprees. I kind of believe it because they're kind of mean, a lot of them to start with. Maybe a beehive fell down, rain got in it, and it sat around and it fermented into mead. Somewhere someone started fermenting things. Someone put milk into some sort of animal skin and it turned into yogurt. And yogurt, we keep it in the fridge, but you can leave it out for a couple of weeks. It's pretty sour. It's acid, you remember fat Thomas, acidity. Or someone put milk into an animal's stomach and it curdled into cheese. So there's an enzyme that baby mammals have that they need in order to digest mother's milk, and it will also help digest anyone else's milk, right? So that's how to make cheeses. So grain cultivation may have enabled our transition from hunter-gatherer societies to agrarian societies, for better or for worse. And beyond enabling that transition, grain may have even motivated it. Why some people say consistent access to alcohol is the motivation. I think this is called the drunken monkey theory, something like that. Anthropology, right? And weak alcohol is a good water treatment system. There was a long period after we started growing grain, which meant we started growing grain and then we started living in denser and denser cities. We didn't understand sanitation, so everyone was sick all the time. But somebody figured out, without understanding why, you can drink alcohol and you won't get sick. And just weak alcohol, so like weak beer, weak wine, and you wouldn't get sick. You drink the water, you get sick. Don't drink the water, you can drink the beer. And and again, part of it is if you get on a horse and you're drunk, the horse isn't going to crash. But our 2-ton steel boxes going 100 feet per second, just a little over 60 miles an hour, it's more of a problem. And also the beer's gotten a lot stronger. we're not doing wild ferments using ambient yeast from the air. We're taking these very, very engineered yeasts from little silver packets that make really strong drinks. And it's we're our own worst enemies in some ways. I also say when we filter, we get these beautifully clear wines and beers. All of the sort of cloudy stuff is, not all of it, some of it's dead yeast, and dead yeast has B vitamins in it, and B vitamins prevent hangovers. So that's what a hangover helper is, right? So drink cloudy fermented beverages, lower alcohol, and you may be happier. Okay, fermented cabbage is a source of vitamin C. If you don't get vitamin C, you get scurvy. In fact, ascorbic acid, the technical name for vitamin C, is anti-scurvy acid. It's the acid that prevents you from getting scurvy. Roman army rations included fish sauce, great source of amino acids, minerals, and flavor. Salt is a mineral, give or take. Ocean travel, desert travel, space travel, alcohol, religious rites, and motivations for fermenting. You can eat things out of season. You can have a more diverse diet. You can create new and interesting flavors, textures, and intoxicants. It's a theme, but it's part of the fermenting story. Nutritive or digestive benefits, make dangerous foods edible, make dangerous water potable. Some things we don't necessarily think of as being fermented: chocolate, coffee, vanilla, olives. I'm going to skip ahead to some tips and then take some questions because we're at 5 minutes. And so lactofermentation, how to: salt plus ambient bacteria. Salt slows down unwanted bacteria, buying time for lactic acid bacteria to produce lactic acid to lower the pH. And the thing that makes these guys, they are able to tolerate a lower water availability environment. So halophilic, the microbes that survive in a high salt environment are exactly the ones that can tolerate a low water availability environment, right? So B and C vitamins, enzymes. There are some unique things that can be created by fermentation, like nattokinase is a compound that is only produced by natto. If you don't know what natto is, there's a natto maker from Arlington whose name is eluding me. And they're here, so go ask about natto. And in some cases, microbes themselves help your digestion. That's a bit overplayed, I think. I don't think they help as much as people might think. But then even dead microbes may help your digestion. So people say, oh, the stomach is so acidic, nothing survives, 1 in a billion survives. And that's fine, but bits and pieces of the dead microbes can be used by the living microbes for parts, apparently. This is what I read. It's fascinating. And, okay, here's some tips. Wash your hands, but don't use bad soap. Like, don't use antibacterial soap. Don't use soap that has like weird moisturizers that never wash off your hands. There are some, I'm not going to name names by names and names of them. Weigh your salt, label your jars with blue tape. And yeah, I have a lot more to say, but as a food trend, I think we moved from molecular gastronomy and a lot of sort of sciencey ways of processing food towards fermenting. Like fermenting is like the trend now, and yesterday's food trend. So I say some modernist techniques are useful to have around, like sous vide is, I think, the thing from molecular gastronomy that stuck, especially for home cooks. I don't know necessarily how much maybe people use like emulsifiers more than they did, or whatever, weird powders. But fermenting is a trend, but it's also very old. And let's see. I think I can take questions because Yeah, I'll take questions. I'll go to my Q&A slide here, where once again.
So have you found when you're fermenting, say, for instance, cabbage, that it's better to source it from a local farm and have it be fresh so that the microbes are still there? Or does it work just as well with a cabbage that maybe from the grocery store that might have had them die?
That's a great question. So when I'm fermenting cabbage, is it better if it's fresh from a farmer's market or from my yard? Or is it okay to do it from the store? Well, in practice, I'm not doing it to survive. I'm usually doing it for demonstration purposes. In the perfect world, I'd be growing it all myself and picking it and fermenting it. You can make very nice cabbage from store-bought, very nice sauerkraut from store-bought cabbages. I would encourage you to get organic ones. There are different pesticides on them, but they're better. They're less likely to cause problems. There's some vegetables that they put fungicides on and antibacterial things, and that could mess up your ferment. With anything like a cabbage, you might want to discard the outer leaves anyway, even no matter how beautiful it is. But yeah, you can ferment a store-bought cabbage, perfectly well.
So one argument for making sourdough over other kinds of bread is that the sourdough will break down phytic acid and make other minerals more available. I was just curious if that's true with other foods, like you found in your experience or research, and what those are.
Yes, and in fact, I talked about that in the part I didn't get to. There's another one, like with cassava. There's certain kinds of cassava that have to be fermented because they have some alkaloids in them. They have some toxins in them that get decreased. There are a lot of, plants don't really want to be eaten necessarily. Because if you eat a green leafy thing, you're kind of killing it. Fruits want to be eaten because you eat them, you swallow their seeds, you poop them out somewhere and they grow. But vegetables don't want to be eaten, and so they have these defense systems which include toxins like phytic acid or whatever. And so fermenting in a number of cases neutralizes some of it. It's not just sourdough, but that's an important one.
Do you recommend sterilizing jars before making them? You have to do that.
Do I recommend sterilizing jars? I run them through the dishwasher. I don't sterilize them for this. For canning, absolutely, you have to sterilize them. For fermenting, it's a numbers game. We're courting the bacteria that, you don't want any dirt on them or something. And, if you have COVID or something, viruses are pretty durable. So if you have a viral illness, don't make sauerkraut for other people, right? Maybe that's obvious, but maybe it's not, because maybe you think, the fermentation will take care of it. It might not. So, but in general, normal dirt and stuff is fine. Time for one question. Okay, I'm going to be. Was that hand up? I'm going to be at the book table signing books and answering questions for as long as I need to. So thank you, and